The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble courtyard of palace as Queen Consort prepared for what seemed like an ordinary day of royal duties. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and the usual bustle of palace staff echoed through the grand corridors. However, this Tuesday would prove to be anything but ordinary. At precisely 9:15 a.m., an urgent phone call reached the Queen Consort's private secretary. The voice on the other end was tense, delivering news that would immediately change the course of the day. Elderly mother Shand had been rushed to the hospital after suffering what appeared to be a serious cardiac episode. The 85-year-old woman had collapsed at her countryside home, and doctors were uncertain about her condition. The Queen Consort, who had been reviewing her schedule for a charity luncheon later that afternoon, felt her world shift beneath her feet. Despite her royal position and the composed public image she maintained, was, at her core, a devoted daughter. The thought of her mother fighting for her life while she attended ceremonial functions was unbearable. Without hesitation, she instructed her staff to cancel all appointments for the day. Her personal assistant began making frantic phone calls to reschedule meetings with various charitable organizations, while her lady-in-waiting started gathering essential items for what could be an extended stay at the hospital. The palace machinery, usually so precise and calculated, suddenly shifted into emergency mode. As news of the medical emergency spread through the palace's inner circles, staff members moved with quiet efficiency. The Queen Consort's driver was summoned, and security protocols were quickly reviewed. However, in the midst of this controlled chaos, one crucial element was overlooked: the formal notification of the Royal Protection Unit about the sudden change in plans. Sergeant James Mitchell had been stationed at the palace's East Wing entrance for nearly 8 years. A decorated former military officer with tour in Afghanistan and Iraq, he took his duty to protect the royal family with absolute seriousness. His post required him to monitor all movements in and out of the palace, maintaining detailed logs and ensuring that proper protocols were followed at all times. On this particular morning, Mitchell noticed unusual activity around the Queen Consort's quarters. Staff members were moving more quickly than usual, and there seemed to be an urgency in their conversations that caught his attention. However, he had not received any official notification about changes to the day's schedule or security arrangements. At approximately 10:30 a.m., Mitchell observed the Queen Consort's official vehicle being prepared in the courtyard. The driver appeared to be loading several bags into the trunk, and palace staff were gathered around the car in what seemed like preparation for departure. This immediately raised red flags for the experienced guard, as no departure had been logged in the official schedule he had reviewed that morning. The Queen Consort emerged from the palace moments later, moving with visible urgency. She was dressed in a simple dark coat, her usual composed demeanor replaced by obvious distress and concern. Mitchell could see that she was deeply troubled, but protocol demanded that he verify any unscheduled departures, regardless of the circumstances or the person involved. As the royal vehicle began to move toward the gate, Mitchell stepped forward and raised his hand in the universal gesture to stop. The driver, recognizing the authority of the royal guard, immediately brought the car to a halt. Through the window, Mitchell could see the Queen Consort's surprised and somewhat frustrated expression as she realized what was happening. The guard approached the vehicle with the respect and professionalism that his position demanded, but his resolve was unwavering. He had been trained to follow protocol without exception, understanding that the security of the royal family depended on strict adherence to established procedures. Even in emergency situations, certain protocols existed for good reason and could not be bypassed without proper authorization. Mitchell politely but firmly explained to the driver that he had not received official notification of any scheduled departure for the Queen Consort. He requested that the vehicle remain in position while he the situation through proper channels. The Queen Consort, despite her personal distress about her mother's condition, recognized that the guard was simply doing his job according to the strict security measures that protected her and the entire royal family. The tension in the air was palpable as precious minutes ticked by. Every moment of delay meant more time away from her mother's bedside, yet the Queen Consort understood the importance of the security protocols that governed royal movements. She had lived within this system long enough to know that exceptions, even for family emergencies, could potentially create vulnerabilities that might be exploited by those with harmful intentions. Mitchell contacted his supervisor through his radio, explaining the situation and requesting immediate clarification. The radio crackled to life as messages flew back and forth between various levels of palace security. The Queen Consort sat in the backseat of her vehicle, fighting back tears of frustration and worry, while palace staff gathered at a respectful distance, uncertain how to proceed. The guards' actions, though seemingly harsh given the circumstances, reflected the reality of royal security in the modern world. Every movement, every departure, every change in routine had to be carefully coordinated and approved. The threat level facing the royal family meant that spontaneous actions, even in genuine emergencies, could potentially put lives at risk if proper security measures were not followed. As the standoff continued, word of the situation began to spread through the palace. Senior staff members who were aware of the Queen Consort's family emergency rushed to resolve the security clearance issue. Phone calls were made to the appropriate departments, and the necessary authorizations began to flow through the official channels. The Queen Consort, despite her royal status and the urgency of her personal situation, remained in the vehicle as protocol required. She understood that challenging the guards' authority in this moment would set a dangerous precedent that could undermine the entire security structure designed to protect her family. Her cooperation, though difficult given the circumstances, demonstrated her understanding of the delicate balance between personal needs and public safety. The minutes stretched endlessly as Sergeant Mitchell maintained his position beside the royal vehicle. His radio buzzed with constant communication as palace security coordinators worked frantically to resolve the authorization issue. The Queen Consort sat quietly in the backseat, her hands clasped tightly together, her mind racing with thoughts of her mother's condition and the precious time being lost to bureaucratic procedures. Palace staff members began gathering in the courtyard, drawn by the unusual scene unfolding before them. Whispered conversations spread through the crowd as they tried to understand why the Queen Consort's departure had been halted. Some newer staff members looked confused and concerned, while veteran employees nodded knowingly, understanding that security protocols superseded even royal urgency. Sir Malcolm Richards, the palace's chief security officer, received an urgent call in his office overlooking the east courtyard. Through his window, he could see the standoff taking place below. A former Scotland Yard detective with 30 years of experience protecting high-profile individuals, Richards understood both the necessity of Mitchell's actions and the delicate nature of the situation developing before his eyes. Richards quickly gathered the facts about the Queen Consort's family emergency while simultaneously reviewing the security protocols that governed unscheduled royal departures. The challenge was clear: maintain the integrity of security procedures while showing appropriate compassion for a family crisis. He knew that any decision he made would set a precedent for how similar situations would be handled in the future. Meanwhile, in the vehicle, the Queen Consort's driver, William, found himself in an unprecedented situation. Had been driving for the royal family for over 15 years and had never encountered a circumstance where his passenger was prevented from leaving the palace. He remained professional and calm, but the tension was evident in his tight grip on the steering wheel as he waited for resolution. The Queen Consort's personal protection officer, Detective Inspector Sarah Collins, arrived at the scene within minutes of being about the situation. Collins had been conducting a routine security sweep in another part of the palace when the emergency arose. As she approached the vehicle, she could see the strain on the Queen Consort's face and the determination in Mitchell's stance. Collins immediately began coordinating with Mitchell and the Security Command Center to expedite the authorization process. She understood the delicate balance required in this situation, respecting the guard's duty to follow protocol while addressing the urgent family matter that demanded the Queen Consort's immediate attention. Her experience in royal protection had taught her that even emergency situations required careful handling to maintain security integrity. As the standoff entered its second hour, media personnel stationed outside the palace gates began to notice the unusual activity. Photographers with long-range lenses started capturing images of the stationary royal vehicle surrounded by security personnel. The palace's media relations team, monitoring news feeds and social media, quickly became aware that the situation was attracting unwanted attention. The pressure to resolve the situation intensified as palace officials realized that prolonged delays could result in negative publicity. However, They also understood that rushing through security protocols could potentially compromise the safety measures that protected the entire royal family. The delicate balance between public perception and security requirements created additional complexity in an already challenging situation. Queen Consort, despite her personal anguish about her mother's condition, began to see the broader implications of the situation. She recognized that how this incident was handled would likely influence security procedures for years to come. Her cooperation with the process, though personally difficult, demonstrated her commitment to maintaining the systems designed to protect her family and the institution of the monarchy. The hospital where her mother was being treated called twice during the delay, providing updates on her condition. Each call increased the Queen Consort's anxiety and her desire to be at her mother's bedside. However, she also understood that the guards' actions, though frustrating in the moment, reflected the serious threats that the royal family faced and the need for unwavering security protocols. Sergeant Mitchell, despite the pressure of the situation, never wavered in his commitment to following proper procedures. His military background had taught him that discipline and adherence to protocol were essential, especially in high-stress situations. He understood that his actions would be scrutinized and possibly criticized, but he remained focused on his duty to protect the royal family according to established guidelines. The palace's legal team was consulted to ensure that any expedited authorization process would not create problematic precedents. They worked quickly to draft temporary emergency protocols that would allow for faster approval of unscheduled departures while maintaining essential security measures. This process, though necessary, added additional time to an already extended delay. Palace communications staff began preparing statements to address potential media inquiries about the situation. They understood that any public explanation would need to balance transparency with security considerations. The challenge was to provide enough information to satisfy public curiosity while not revealing details about security procedures that could be exploited by those with harmful intentions. As word of the delay reached other members of the royal family, expressions of support began flowing in for both the Queen Consort's family situation and the guards' adherence to protocol. The incident highlighted the complex reality of royal life, where personal emergencies must be balanced against security requirements and public responsibilities. The Queen Consort's staff worked diligently to manage the various complications arising from the delayed departure. Hospital visits were rescheduled, security details were adjusted, and contingency plans were developed for different scenarios depending on her mother's condition. The machinery of royal logistics shifted into high gear to accommodate the changing circumstances. The incident also prompted immediate discussions about reviewing and potentially updating emergency protocols for family crises. Palace officials began examining whether existing procedures adequately addressed situations where royal family members needed to respond quickly to personal emergencies while maintaining appropriate security measures. Throughout the ordeal, the Queen Consort maintained her composure and dignity, understanding that her behavior during this crisis would be remembered and potentially influence how similar situations would be handled in the future. Her grace under pressure demonstrated the poise expected of someone in her position, even when facing personal distress and bureaucratic obstacles. After nearly 2 hours of delays, the authorization finally came through the official channels. Sir Malcolm Richards personally delivered the clearance to Sergeant Mitchell, along with detailed instructions for the security arrangements that would accompany the Queen Consort's emergency departure. The relief on everyone's faces was visible as the bureaucratic machinery finally aligned to address the urgent family situation. However, as Mitchell prepared to wave the royal vehicle through, he noticed another issue that protocol demanded he address. During the extended delay, several personal items had been hastily loaded into the Queen Consort's vehicle by well-meaning staff members who were trying to prepare for what might be an extended stay at the hospital. These items had not gone through the standard security screening procedures required for all materials accompanying royal family members. The experienced guard found himself in another delicate position. The authorization for departure had been granted, but his training and duties required him to ensure that all items in the vehicle met security requirements. Personal belongings, gifts, and any other materials accompanying royal family members were subject to specific screening procedures, regardless of the circumstances or the urgency of the situation. Detective Inspector Collins approached Mitchell to discuss the situation. She could see several bags and packages in the vehicle that had been loaded during the emergency preparations. Some contained clothing and personal items hastily gathered from the Queen Consort's quarters, while others held flowers, cards, and small gifts that had been intended for the canceled charity events of the day. The Queen Consort, observing the continued delay, asked about the nature of the new problem. When informed that her personal items needed to be screened according to security protocols, she expressed both understanding and frustration. Every additional minute of delay meant more time away from her mother's bedside, yet she recognized that security measures existed for important reasons and could not be arbitrarily suspended. Palace security personnel quickly assembled a mobile screening unit in the courtyard. The specialized equipment, normally used for processing items before official events, was wheeled out to examine the contents of the bags and packages loaded into the royal vehicle. The process required removing each item, documenting its contents, and conducting appropriate security checks. The Queen Consort's lady-in-waiting, Mrs., supervised the screening process with obvious anxiety. She had been responsible for hastily gathering the items during the emergency, and she was acutely aware that any oversights on her part could potentially compromise security or cause further delays. Her hands trembled slightly as she helped security personnel identify and categorize the various personal belongings. Among the items requiring screening were several bouquets of flowers that had been prepared for the canceled charity luncheon. The beautiful arrangements, meant to brighten the day of elderly residents at a local care facility, now seemed almost ironic given the Queen Consort's own concerns about her elderly mother. The flowers were carefully examined and approved, but the process added precious minutes to an already extended delay. A small jewelry box containing items the Queen Consort had intended to wear to the afternoon's events required particularly careful screening. The ornate pieces, some with historical significance, needed to be documented and against palace inventories. Security personnel handled these items with extreme care, understanding their value and significance while maintaining their professional focus on safety requirements. Personal correspondence and cards from well-wishers, intended to be read during quiet moments between official duties, also required examination. Each letter and card was carefully inspected according to established protocols for screening mail directed to royal family members. The irony was not lost on anyone present that messages of goodwill were being treated with the same security scrutiny typically reserved for potentially threatening materials. The Queen Consort's mobile phone, tablet, and other electronic devices underwent specialized screening procedures. These items, which contained personal communications and potentially sensitive information, required particular attention from the security team. The devices were quickly examined using specialized equipment designed to detect any unauthorized modifications or security threats. A small bag containing medications and personal care items required verification against medical records and security clearances. Palace medical staff were consulted to confirm that all medications were properly prescribed and posed no security risks. This process, though thorough and necessary, added another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Books and reading materials that the Queen Consort had planned to enjoy during the charity events were examined page by page. Security protocols required checking all printed materials for hidden objects or dangerous substances. The careful inspection of these innocent items demonstrated the thoroughness of security measures designed to protect royal family members from all potential threats. Sergeant Mitchell supervised the entire screening process with the same attention to detail he had shown throughout the incident. Despite the emotional circumstances and the pressure to expedite the departure, he ensured that each item was properly examined and documented. His commitment to protocol, though it extended an already difficult delay, reflected the serious nature of royal security requirements. The Queen Consort's personal photographer had prepared a small bag of equipment for documenting the charity visits. Cameras, lenses, and electronic accessories all required individual inspection and approval. The technical nature of this equipment required consultation with specialized security personnel trained in identifying potential threats disguised as legitimate electronic devices. A thermos containing tea and a small container of homemade biscuits prepared by palace kitchen staff underwent chemical testing to verify their contents. Even items prepared within the palace's secure environment required verification when accompanying royal family members on unscheduled departures. The testing process, though routine for security personnel, seemed almost surreal given the innocuous nature of the afternoon refreshments. Several charitable gifts intended for presentation during the day's canceled events required individual examination and documentation. These items, ranging from commemorative plaques to handcrafted art pieces, each had to be against palace records and checked for any security concerns. The thorough inspection of these well-intentioned gifts highlighted the complex security environment in which the royal family operated. As the screening process continued, palace staff members worked to coordinate the Queen Consort's arrival at the hospital with medical personnel and local security forces. The extended delay required adjustments to security arrangements and updates to local law enforcement agencies responsible for protecting royal family members when they ventured outside palace grounds. The media presence outside the palace gates continued to grow as news of the unusual activity spread through various channels. Palace communications staff monitored the developing coverage while working to maintain appropriate privacy regarding the family medical emergency. The challenge of managing public interest while protecting personal privacy added another dimension to an already complex situation. After 3.5 hours of delays, security procedures, and careful documentation, the last item was finally cleared through the screening process. Sergeant Mitchell completed his paperwork with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that every item loaded into the Queen Consort's vehicle was properly documented and approved according to palace security protocols. His thoroughness, though it had contributed to the extended delay, reflected the unwavering commitment to safety that protected the royal family. The Queen Consort emerged from her vehicle one final time to personally thank Sergeant Mitchell for his dedication to duty, despite the difficult circumstances the delay had created for her family situation. Her grace and understanding in this moment demonstrated the character that had earned her respect throughout her years of royal service. She recognized that the guard's actions, though personally challenging for her, reflected the serious security environment that surrounded royal life. Detective Inspector Collins coordinated with the hospital security team to ensure a smooth transition when the royal party arrived at the medical facility. The extended delay had required adjustments to security arrangements and coordination with local law enforcement agencies. Additional personnel were deployed to manage the media presence that had inevitably gathered outside the hospital after word of the Queen Consort's mother's condition became known. As the royal vehicle finally departed from palace staff, gathered in the courtyard, reflected on the morning's extraordinary events. The incident had tested the balance between human compassion and security protocols, ultimately demonstrating that even in the most urgent personal circumstances, the safety procedures protecting the royal family could not be compromised or bypassed. The Queen Consort arrived at the hospital nearly 4 hours after receiving the initial news about her mother's condition. Fortunately, her mother's condition had stabilized during the morning, and medical personnel reported that the elderly woman was responding well to treatment. The reunion between mother and daughter, delayed by security protocols but finally achieved, was deeply emotional and highlighted the personal sacrifices required by royal life. Palace officials immediately began reviewing the morning's events to identify areas where emergency protocols could be improved without compromising security requirements. The incident highlighted the need for clearer procedures governing family emergencies and the authorization processes required for unscheduled royal departures. Discussions began about creating streamlined emergency protocols that could balance security needs with personal crisis situations. Sergeant Mitchell's actions throughout the incident were thoroughly reviewed by palace security leadership. Far from being criticized for the delays he had caused, Mitchell was commended for his unwavering adherence to protocol under difficult circumstances. His professionalism and commitment to duty, even when faced with personal pressure and emotional circumstances, the highest standards expected of royal protection personnel. The media coverage of the incident focused primarily on the Queen Consort's devotion to her mother and her grace under pressure during the family emergency. However, some coverage also examined the complex security environment surrounding the royal family and the delicate balance required between personal freedom and protective protocols. The incident provided the public with rare insight into the constraints and challenges faced by royal family members in their daily lives. Palace communications staff worked carefully to manage the narrative surrounding the incident, emphasizing both the Queen Consort's devotion to family and the necessary security measures that protected all royal family members. The challenge was to present the security delays as reasonable and necessary while maintaining public sympathy for the personal crisis that had prompted the emergency departure. The Queen Consort spent 3 days at her mother's bedside as the elderly woman recovered from her cardiac episode. During this time, she maintained a reduced schedule of official duties, participating in virtual meetings and handling urgent royal business through secure communication channels from the hospital. Her dedication to both family and duty during this challenging period was noted and appreciated by palace staff and the public alike. The incident prompted broader discussions about the evolution of royal security in the modern era. Palace officials began examining whether existing protocols adequately addressed the realities of contemporary royal life, including the need to respond quickly to family emergencies while maintaining appropriate security measures. The goal was to develop procedures that could accommodate personal crises without compromising the safety of royal family members. Training programs for palace security personnel were updated to include scenarios based on the morning's events. New guards and experienced personnel alike studied the incident as an example of how to maintain protocol adherence while showing appropriate sensitivity to personal circumstances. The training emphasized that security requirements, though sometimes difficult to enforce, existed for essential reasons and could not be arbitrarily suspended. The Queen Consort's mother made a full recovery from her cardiac episode and returned home after a week of hospital treatment. The elderly woman, upon learning about the security delays that had prevented her daughter's immediate arrival, expressed both understanding and appreciation for the protective measures that surrounded her daughter's life. Her perspective reinforced the family's commitment to accepting the constraints that came with royal service. Palace security protocols were ultimately revised to include expedited authorization procedures for family medical emergencies. The new protocols maintained essential security requirements while creating clearer channels for rapid approval of unscheduled departures when personal crises arose. The changes reflected lessons learned from the morning's events while preserving the integrity of royal protection systems. The incident became a case study in royal security training programs, demonstrating the complex challenges faced by protection personnel in balancing competing priorities. Future security officers studied Sergeant Mitchell's actions as an example of maintaining professional standards while showing appropriate sensitivity to difficult circumstances. His handling of the situation became a model for how to uphold protocol requirements even under emotional pressure. The Queen Consort's handling of the incident enhanced her reputation for grace under pressure and understanding of the constraints imposed by royal life. Her cooperation with security procedures, despite her personal distress about her mother's condition, demonstrated the maturity and wisdom that had characterized her approach to royal duties. The incident highlighted the personal sacrifices required by royal service and the strength needed to fulfill such responsibilities. Years later, the morning's events would be remembered as a defining moment that illustrated the complex realities of modern royal life. The incident demonstrated that even in the most urgent personal circumstances, the safety and security of the royal family required unwavering attention to established protocols. It also showed how personal crises could be navigated within the constraints of royal security while maintaining both dignity and compassion. The balance between personal freedom and protective security, highlighted so dramatically during those hours of delay, remained a constant challenge for all members of the royal family. The incident served as a reminder that royal service required not only public dedication, but also personal sacrifice, including the acceptance of security measures that could complicate even the most urgent family situations. The Queen Consort's grace throughout the ordeal, the character required for such extraordinary service.